right. Hey, Paul.
Hey Fab, how are you?
Good. Good. Very good. Um, all right. So today, I don't know if you saw the notification, but anyway, I wanted to go a bit more old school, not old school, but original, ask the right questions. And I want to talk about sales process. And this might not be a big topic. This might be a short show, although we do tend to go off topic. But I want to talk about the sales process again, but specifically about like the stages of not necessarily like which stages should go in your process, but this idea of like when what are these deal stages. I find like I speak to reps and not that they don't know what the stage is, right, but there's no value in the stages that they have, for lack of a better word, right? So it's just kind of like deals stay there, and like 3 months, well, not 3 months later, but then 3 weeks later, like, oh yeah, it's true, that deal was won. And you know what I mean, like they're not. So like what are these deal stages, like kind of who should be using them, and why are they so important? And the whole insight came from the label of the field. So silly, but how I find, like, I see a lot of sales, like I don't build sales processes like you do, but I see a lot of sales processes, and so often the labels mean nothing, right? Like, and I, part of me was like, is that part of the issue, right? Is that they don't know why a deal should go from A to Z, A to Z, A to Z, depending who's listening on this. So that's kind of what I want to talk about. Like, what are these stages, and like, how should we be labeling them? But overall, like, how should we be making them more useful for salespeople?
Well, you said a lot of interesting things there, and I'm sure you have opinions on this, but
I do.
It's interesting because, in my opinion, and I think we agree on this because we've talked about this before, but if you've changed your mind, you can tell me.
Yeah.
To me, the deal stages serve two purposes. They serve to help you get an overall idea of how your pipeline's doing, right? Mm-hmm. So to give yourself a pipeline value, right? Of how much.
When you say you mean the rep, or you mean like the organization, or both?
The organization and the rep. So you're looking at your overall pipeline. You say, I need to have $10 million in there, but you can look at that quickly. And obviously, if you're in stage one, you're on, I can't think of the word right now, your percentage. In French, we say pondéré. There, your value,
your weighted value.
Thank you. Your weighted value is, let's say, 5% in your stage 1 and 2 and 3, and then there's all reasons for that, right? So you really, and I do build sales processes, and the sales process to me, or the deal stages, their bigger purpose as an individual salesperson is to remind you of what you need to do throughout your sales process. Mm-hmm. And what you need to do linearly, right? So at first you need to prepare. So let's say in your sales process, well, then that's called preparation. I called it, some people have, some people use different analogies. I literally call it preparation.
Okay.
So, and the weighted value there is 0.
Right.
I haven't talked to anyone. And then for me in stage 1, I won't give you the name yet, but then there's a weighted value there too, and then stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, stage 5. I actually call my stage, my preparation stage 0.
Right.
You haven't done any selling yet.
Right.
So to me, if your deal stages don't make sense as a salesperson, then they're useless. Mm. So what you were saying before is like, well, they don't really mean anything, they just move them down the line. So there's two things that have happened there. Either if you're an independent person, well, you haven't labeled them properly and you're not using them properly, and they're not reminding you of the things you need to do. Or if you're an organization, you haven't taken the time to talk about the methodology and the semantics. The deal stages is semantics. Mm. What you call them should be a reminder of the things you need to do, but we've talked about this a lot too, and each stage has milestones and things that you need to achieve. So it's if you use your CRM and your deal stages properly, they are an assistant. Your deal stages are the KPIs and the milestones you need to achieve. It becomes, your CRM becomes your sales assistant. It tells you what you should be doing. Mm. And right. So that's the sort of bigger picture. Now, ask me in my CRM, which you helped me set up. Am I always clean and perfect? No.
No.
You know, I make mistakes myself. I said, oh yeah, where am I at? And because I know all these stages, have I done that yet? And sometimes what happens is you'll have done 90% of stage one and you'll start at stage two, you know, and you're at 5%, but you didn't ask that question. You could come back, and if you really need that question, you come back and ask it. It is ideally you want to be linear, but sometimes you can loop back because you forgot to do things, or you might loop back if you have an objection.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's the sort of big picture value of why you need to have deal stages and why they need to mean something to you. Now, if you want, we can talk about what they're called, but what's your opinion on that? Like, where do you agree and disagree with me?
Yeah, and I think it's such a simple, like, quote unquote fix, right? Or a simple maybe fix on one hand, but on the flip side of such a simple like indication that your sales process is off, right? Like that if your labels don't make any sense, if you don't quickly look at like, oh, like my stage 3 or my stage 2 is, you know, discovery call, but if it's something else, like, I don't know what, like first call or something, you know, like I find like first call, well, yeah, you're gonna have a first call, like it doesn't mean much, right? But we have discovery call or, you know, fact finding call, whatever you want to call it, but it's like, as long as it's like descriptive, and I think like I find like that's on a high level very quickly, like if you're not looking at your deals, your sales process and looking at different deals, you know, they're all at different stages, and it's not clear what's happening. If there's a stage you're calling like waiting on RFQ, like, well, it's clear, like all the deals that are in there, we're waiting on the RFQ, right? Like there's no guessing game around that. But if it's like waiting on clients, then I'm like, well, what are we waiting for? Like, when do we get to that stage? You know what I mean? Also,
naming the deal stage. I mean, you can't put everything that you need to do in a stage right in the title, or else you know, you have a title this long. So sometimes what I tend to do is I name the stage with the last thing that needs to be done in that stage.
Okay.
Right. So in my preparation stage, well, the last thing I need to be that's done is I'm prepared to make the next step. And you call it first call. I actually have a stage in my CRM called first message.
First message. Interesting.
First message, because it can be an email, it can be a phone call. So I'm not quite in the discovery yet because I haven't talked to them yet.
Right.
But it's sort of a reminder that I've done the first message, and then after I can accumulate a bunch of messages, then they go into first conversation. And then, but there too, have I done the discovery yet? No, then I flip them to discovery. And then at the end of discovery, I've discovered everything.
Right.
And if I haven't discovered everything, I'm not out of that stage.
Right.
But there are a lot of things to do there. So I sort of split up my discovery into different stages that work for me in what I'm prospecting on now. But I'm alone.
Yeah.
Right? So if I was to work with other people, my CRM would probably be set up a little different.
Of course.
But then we would have to agree. I'd have to tell my salespeople the name might not even mean anything. You know, we both used to work somewhere where they used a baseball analogy. Well, that doesn't really mean anything. First base, second base, third base. It's just, you need to explain the semantics to the people you're working with.
Yeah. And I get that. I think I find this idea though that, and I know we're very harping on this tiny little thing, right, which is like stage labels, but
that's what podcasts are for, Fab.
After over 100 episodes, you can start nitpicking little details. I just find it was like so brilliant, right? Because you're like how long is your onboarding if your stage label, sorry, is cryptic? Sure, it means the same thing for everybody, right? Like whatever you call it, like first base or whatever it is, like everyone understands. But you know, how much training does that rep need to get until they understand what second base is, or what, you know, mountaintop is, or whatever you want to call it, right? Like, I think to me is like, I tend to be a very pragmatic person, which is why I do a lot of operation stuff. But, you know, I find it was like so obvious that it's like, yes, right? Like if I'm at the, you know, waiting on RFQ, like I know exactly what needs to happen at this stage, right? Or request RFQ, or
You see, I'm going to challenge you on that.
Oh, nice.
And here's why I'm going to challenge you. Because let's say you're waiting on RFQ.
Yeah.
But there's a whole, like, there's a lot of things. That's a milestone. Okay, first of all, when you're waiting on RFQ, it's a milestone, right? It's not. You can call your deal stage that, but that's just one of the things that can happen in your stage. Either that, or you got like, I've seen people with CRM where they have like 30 stages, right?
Yeah.
Because they're actually enumerating every milestone.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but then you're like, oh my God, that's a lot of work, right? And every time you talk. So personally, this is where I'll challenge you as a salesperson. I would even be okay with someone naming their different deal stages by colors.
Right.
Yellow, green, blue, orange, black, whatever. It's honestly, to me, the deal stage name, for me, what I did is the last thing I need to do. That's me personally.
Yeah.
But if someone said, hey, we're at the Superman stage, we're at the water bottle stage, we're at the glasses stage, it doesn't matter as long as, and this is where I'm going to tie it in, be a little bit on a tangent, as long as you take the time to explain to your team the logic behind that. So let's say someone says, you're at the water stage. Well, why do you call it the water stage? Well, because you're at the beginning and that's the basic ingredient. You're preparing. So it's the water stage. Okay. And then at the end, you might be at the, at the steak stage. You're eating your dinner, right? So it doesn't matter as long as you're having that discussion. And where I want to challenge you is, you're pragmatic. But if you're a salesperson and you come onto my company and I teach you how to sell our product and I teach you how to have the conversation and we have that whole training and I train you on this CRM approach that's a little quirky in its names and whatnot, you might even remember it more because—
That's a good point.
So
valid.
Naming it, I don't think, honestly, Fab, I think it depends on the company and what they're trying to do on how they name the deal stage.
Yeah. I think what you said at the end was right. I think how a company culture, I know we're going far away, but there we go. Reflects itself all over the place, and it can be something as benign as the deal stage. If you're a more colorful company, let's call it that, well then having a blue stage and a green stage and whatever, or like yellow and blue, and then you have green or whatever, like it all, that I could see that happening. To me, the label matters a lot more than you maybe communicating, is because they have to mean something, right? And so if your culture is like, let's say, bubbly and blah blah blah, or like maybe you sell, maybe your catering service, and so then having water and then flour and all that makes sense, right? But I think the stage, the label is so important, and I think a lot of companies are not that. So if a company is not that, like I like what you were saying at the beginning about your sales process, which is very descriptive of the last thing that needs to get done. And I think especially if you have like a company that has like maybe more junior reps, I think that could be very helpful in understanding. But you're right. I'm sure if you have a sales process that's stands out and it's like the stages are blue and green and whatever, that's probably going to be remembered, right? Like that's something that.
Yeah, I think it's an association, but that's also how your brain works, right? So if you were running the sales department, you might say, hey, we're going to call the stage name like this for this reason, because that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
But you just have to explain it to the people. Now, what I think is more important is that you have a linear deal stages, or a linear process, mostly linear. Like I said before, you can jump back, but mostly linear sales process that people know at each stage what is happening.
Yeah.
That to me is the really important thing, because I know you're a HubSpot expert, and you're probably frustrated sometimes by certain clients who have like wonky, and people don't put any time. The worst thing is when you don't put any time or effort in. I don't care what you call it, but take some time to think about what you're calling the deal.
Right. I think that's what it boils down to, and we're both saying the same thing at that level.
I think we are. And the last thing I'd like to say on that is, like, for example, and you just gave me an idea. I've got a hardwood company. They sell hardwood floors. So I think their deal stages could be like the least expensive hardwood floor to the most expensive hardwood floor.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
All this, birch.
Because then you have the visual of like the weight.
Exactly. Exotic, oak or something, whatever. Babinga, whatever it might be. That way, people are like, oh, so that's where I like the idea of naming, because then you put time and effort. What do you mean Babinga? Okay, it's this. Oh, okay, boom. You have an image in your head.
Yeah.
And if
No, I like that. I think to me, it still boils back to, if I bring it back to the start, it's like, I think you just have to, you have to make sure that it's not confusing your salespeople. And I find and I think what you said, it really makes it, it's like when you're not putting any thought into it, that's when it gets very dangerous, right? Because it's like, then they ultimately mean nothing. Fine, whether you're calling it from, yellow to blue to green or whatever, like there's a meaning behind that. It might take a little longer to adapt, but probably easier to remember in the long run. But they matter, and your stages matter. And the reason why I'm kind of harping on these labels, even though on the surface, like, it's a label, who cares? But
you want them to matter to the people who are using them.
Because if the label makes no sense, then does the stage really make sense? Like you said, like back like a long time ago, one of my first clients, like they had like 14 stages, because they were like, and they were a mix of milestones versus things, like it was like confusing. And even the sales leader at the end, like who was the new sales leader, was like so confused, like I can't even I can't forecast revenue because like none of this makes sense. So yeah, they matter. It does matter. And whether you end up calling them, who your team is, and stuff like that, you could go something more colorful, more playful, more fun, or you can stick with something more pragmatic, like discovery call or like contract sent or whatever.
But they have to matter. They have to mean something. They have to bring something to memory, right? Yeah. Okay, total tangent, but I'll just tell you this for a second, because I think this is where it comes down to. When I was a kid, we used to play this. It was really little kid. It was a guessing game. So what you would do is every card that you would flip over had, like, so if it was the left quadrant, you'd say, okay, I'm dreaming of a tree. And if it was the right quadrant, is I'm taking a ride in the car. So you would tell the story, and then and you were supposed to be, just talking this mumbo jumbo, and the other person would guess what your cards were.
Okay.
So it's the same thing with a sales process. It doesn't matter the name, as long as it brings back a trained association that is logical to the person.
Right.
And then your next thing, you said, where do they live? What do you mean?
I don't know. I was just going like, where is it? Obviously, it's clearly in your CRM. And the reason why I was thinking about that is because, still encountering people that have no CRM, right? And so then they're working off of Excel spreadsheets and stuff like that. And that's where, again, stages become very difficult, right? I mean, I guess you could build it.
I don't understand anyone who wouldn't have a CRM today. I mean, they're free.
I know.
For free. Like, what the hell's your problem?
I know. And so it's just, I wanted to be clear, like they're living in their CRM, like it's the sale. Like to me, it's almost those sales stages are almost the core of your the sales part of your CRM, right? Which is like, that's where the selling happens, right? It's in those deal stages.
But I personally think, being a sales trainer, part-time and a sales consultant, I think your sales process should all be in your head as well. I think what your CRM does is it's a reminder, it's an assistant. Did I do this? And you'll forget stuff. And it also brings it all together. Like you can't remember the stages of 100 different clients, right? If we had that kind of memory, we wouldn't need a CRM, right?
Right. Well,
but ultimately, your CRM is a reminder of things you need to do, but you should know your sales process. Like if you sit I think the first people when you train a salesperson should be, well, what's a sales process?
Yeah.
What happens here? Stage 1, stage 0, whatever.
So question, not as much a challenge, but a question, like, isn't then the risk that salespeople won't use it as much? Right? If I'm talking to Paul the Flirt Consulting, and I know what I need to do, and I need to know what's next. And I understand that most sales teams should have like a lot of deals, and so they like you said before, right? Like it's impossible to remember what's happening with dozens or hundreds of deals. But isn't that run a risk also, though?
If you run the risk of not using your CRM because you know your sales process too much, your CRM you're not really using it properly. I mean, there's there's tons of contact information there.
Right. No, but I meant really more on terms of like, because for you, right, if it's supposed to help you close, fine, that's one thing. But the bottom line afterwards is that it helps you get trained as well, right? If your sales manager then can't see what's going on, and if you're 6 weeks late on updating stuff,
yeah, but ultimately you want the salesperson to know their sales process. I mean,
right.
Ultimately, like if I sat down with you and I have a conversation with you and I'm doing a role play, if I have to look at my CRM to remember what I'm doing next.
Right. Fair enough.
But what it does overall is it tells me where I'm at with each stage. Oh, Fab's great-grandmother just called and he had to get off the call. Okay, we stopped at the discovery stage. Okay, I put that in my CRM. And next time I talk to him, I remember I take some notes. Oh, it's true. His great-grandmother called. He had to get off the phone. I still know what I need to do next. And you should know that because that's a whole other ball of wax. It's another conversation. But if you have to think about your sales process all the time while you're having a super long sales call, then you're not listening to what your prospect's telling you. And
that's really good. Yes. Right. Because that's the flip side of being not too pragmatic, but too prescribed in your CRM, is that then it removes that consultativeness.
Yeah.
That's a word. Because you're just looking at updating properties as opposed to just having a conversation and knowing that, well, I need to know this and this and this and that and that.
Like in my head, when I'm talking to any prospect, so I've done my preparation, I'm having that first conversation. That's all part of discovery, right? I'm just discovering a bunch of stuff. Once I've finished discovering, and what's in there, right? Like the challenge, the need, the opportunity, the motivation. Once I've gotten to the motivation, I understand all the different things, the problems, and I know that I can help them with. And then I go into the confirmation. I say, look, if you could do this, and that, and I could help you, fix this $1 million problem, are you willing to invest $100,000? Yes. Yeah. Okay, I'm in the confirmation, and then I'm in my presentation, and then boom, I'm closing. I know all that in my head, right? But I don't remember every conversation I've had with every client, maybe because I'm 55, but so my CRM helps me there. My CRM also helps me because it might be automated, sending out emails for me at different stages. It also helps me because once in a while I forget who all the people were in the company. I forget the exact amounts. I forget some of the details. It just brings everything together. It helps me with my marketing. I mean, it's way more than just a reminder of the sales process is in there so that I do everything. But after a while, I should know what's going on.
Right. And that's a great way to send it. Like, yes, your stages matter, your stuff like that, but obviously your CRM is way more than that, right? Your sales, like you said, your CRM is your customer service tool, your CRM is your marketing tool, and it's also your sales enablement tool, right? Like you just mentioned, which documents did they see, or how many, who was at our last meeting, stuff like that, or who's coming to our next meeting, and so on and so forth.
But yes, exactly. So exactly. Now I'm looking at another one of your questions, and you said, and I love this question. You said, when should you build and identify your sales process and stages? That's a great question, because excuse me, everyone, it's fucking loaded. And I'll tell you why it's loaded because there are some basic, listen, a sales process, a sale is based on human psychology, right? So when you're being consultative, there's certain things that everyone should be doing. You need to find out what your client really needs if you're trying to be consultative to have that connection, right? So there's certain things. So when you're building your sales process, there's some, there's the introduction, the preparation, the discovery needs to happen. In my opinion, the confirmation has to happen of what the issues are. You have to get them to say yes, to acquiesce, or else it's just a guessing game.
Right.
And then you have to present your solution, and then you have to normally naturally close, because you said, well, we're solving everything. Is there any reason we wouldn't do business together? No, boom. Okay, so that consultative sales process will exist no matter what. Now, where your sales process might change is that there might be different things coming. You just spoke before of an RFQ. Well, if I'm our client who's in aerospace, they have RFQs, they have RFPs, there's some complicated process, there's some details that have to go back and forth. Well, all these things need to integrate into your sales process. You need to think about it, say, how does this work? Try it out, do some role plays, look at real stage situations, and then you should be taking, don't just take 10 minutes to set up your deal stages, take like a week or two, think about it, change them around, have a discussion, what makes the most sense, challenge your employees, challenge your boss, challenge, talk to your clients, and then you put together your sales process. And then that sales process needs to live in your CRM. And then the next stage, which is really important, is you'll name them. Now, where I'm going to say it's loaded is that there's some basic human psychology in sales. Mm-hmm. Sales is really psychology. I mean, it's sales is like meeting someone that you fall in love with. Sales is like taming a bear. The bear's in front of you, or taming a wild animal, right? At first, the animal's like, "Who are you? I want to kill you." "Oh, you got a carrot for me." "Oh, okay." Or you got a piece of meat for me. Okay, and then and that's what you're doing in sales, because often you're talking to someone who's like, "I don't want to be sold to. Piss off. Everything's working fine." Mm-hmm. So then there's that whole psychology. So there's some basic precepts, in my opinion, that need to happen to soften the person so that you can find out if there really is an issue or something that you can help them with. Yeah. And that's basic, I think, to any consultative B2B sale. And I'm not talking about selling a luxury item or, your 17th pair of glasses or your 100th pair of shoes or your 10th car. I mean, that's not that's irrational. That's all bling, right? So B2C is, we're in another world. We're talking B2B here. Something that's going to serve a purpose and help you achieve as a client an objective. So, yeah. So that basic psychology is where all of sales methodologies have evolved from. Right. Whether it's gap selling, whether it's challenger sale, whether it's any form of consultative sale, whether it's baseline selling, all of these they're all based on a consultative format of selling, which is based in basic human psychology. So how do you build your sales process? You got to think of these things, and you got to sit down and say, well, when we sold to our last 10 clients, what is it that they were looking for? What did we do? What are the things that were important? When did the lights go off? What questions did we ask? What are the main issues that most of our clients deal with?
And I would argue also, maybe even more importantly, is looking at your lost clients, right? Like, why did we lose them? Like, what information did we not go get? And you'll have some normal losses as well, right? Like, especially if you're in RFQ world, sometimes like people have to go on price or whatever. But I think in the vast majority of cases, like, why you lose somebody is probably even more meaningful than why you win somebody. Because what I've seen is, like, sometimes you win somebody because it's serendipitous, right? Like, you're selling what they needed at that exact moment, and you really didn't need to ask anything.
You think you're a great salesperson, but it had nothing to do with you.
Yeah, they were just like, prices within what we had budgeted. We need to have some.
Even the opposite. They would have been willing to pay 10% more, but you're a bad salesperson.
Yeah, exactly. But what you lose, I think that makes a lot of there's a lot of gold in there, because
that's a great point, Fab, and it's very true, and that needs to be part of your building of your sales process, understanding why you lose clients. Absolutely.
And I think, and obviously, like, how often or when to me, and you could disagree with me, but a sales process is a living thing, right? It's something that needs to evolve over time. Obviously, the more mature you are as a company, probably assuming your products or service don't change much. But I think especially the earlier stages, like an early stage company, like when you're still defining your product, defining your target market, defining the pains that you address and all that, I think you need to have these regular reviews of, like, why.
So true. Can I give a real case scenario there?
Sure.
2 years ago, before the pandemic, when I would call people, I would say, hey, I help executives, blah, 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 with who are concerned about sales growth, revenue growth. I'm telling you, 90% of the time, so, well, who's not concerned about revenue growth?
Right.
In the last 2 years, I hear my sales are crazy. That's not my problem. It's just like, it's insane.
Yeah.
My problem is I don't have enough staff. I can't deliver. I don't have enough salespeople. There's a huge shift. So me, myself, and I sat down and says, I got to change. I got to change what I say, because or else I'm going to end up not having any clients.
Right.
And yes, people still want to grow, but there's been a huge, like, the pandemic's changed the paradigm. So I need to adjust to the reality.
Yeah.
So you need to adjust your sales. We can't say, well, there's certain basic elements of psychology that don't change, but I had to readjust my sales process to consider the realities which I don't control.
Yeah, and like when you're doing your evaluations of your lost and won deals, like saying maybe it makes more sense to split up our sale, right? Like we'll sell a HubSpot audit first. Like if they're not buying the audit, I'm not going to work with them. And so I have a 2-stage sales process or whatever. Like I think it's important to look at that and to reevaluate and to look at your product, or maybe your product's changing. You have a new product, and you mentioned the pandemic, but it doesn't have to be the pandemic, right? Like there's also micro shifts within different industries. There's a new player in this space. And things change often. Obviously, the more established you are as a company, those changes are maybe less happen less often. Obviously, it also depends on their volume of deals, right? If you sign 6 multi-million-dollar deals a year, you might have to wait a little longer before you get some meaningful data, versus if you send 6 an hour, like 4-figure salary, because then you can probably get a lot of data very quickly and adjust as you go.
Yeah, and that's very true. Let me come back to something you just said before, and I wrote down, didn't want to forget it. So you said you have to change with the reality of things changing, right? You said that, and you're right. But what's a basic human lazy trait that everyone has is we don't like to change.
Right.
When we wear these pants, or when we brush our teeth a certain way, or we eat certain food, we don't like to change.
No.
So naturally, most people will spend time, set up their sales process, and that's it. Right. But you're right. And what I would ask you, and I'm going to flip it back to you, how often should you review your deal stages and your sales process and your methodology?
Well, like I said, I think for me, my opinion would be more on your maturity of a company. I think the younger you are as a company, the more often you need to change it, because things change so quickly, right? And things change, and you need to maximize revenue. And maybe you're selling one thing, or maybe you lost a client or lost a deal, I should say, and realize like, wow, I really don't understand what their needs are, right? So then what can I do differently? What different questions can I ask? Stuff like that. So I think the younger you are, the more often you need to change. And I would argue, within reason, I would like an early stage company, I would probably look at it quarterly to change it and review it and stuff like that. Later stages, maybe.
I was going to challenge you, because I think even mature companies need to change it too, because often they get stuck in their ways. And
yeah, I think if you're more mature, though, if your product's been around for a long time, if your sales training is like down pat, obviously, this is all assuming that things are going as well as you can possibly imagine that they would go. But I think a more established company with more baggage, I would say, let's call it that, probably can't afford, not financially, but dynamic culturally, to change it too often. Like there's just too much implication of retraining your whole sales team every quarter. But so I think something more.
It depends what we call a change, right? Sometimes it's just a readjustment. It's a couple of things in your sales, your stage and your sales process. And we discuss, in the last year, we've seen this and that. So yeah, it depends what we mean by change. And a huge change, you're right, can be expensive, but a small change, tweaking
and making sure that we're answering, like how, and this is hyper tactical, but how in HubSpot we can like make certain properties required to move a stage from a deal from one stage to the next. Well, maybe it's reviewing what's being required, right? If in the example I gave, I'm tending to lose deals because ultimately we really don't know what the need is. And, we're not quote unquote forcing people to dive deeper into the needs. Well, it could be just a small tweak of like making those properties mandatory and stuff like that. So yeah, that can, and I think that has to happen. I think you need to be analyzing your lost deals consistently. I think that should be a report in your CRM of like lost deal reasons, and dive deeper and sit down with the salespeople, like what really happened here. I think there's a lot of gold in there that people are ignoring.
Now I want to treat your first question.
All right. Okay.
What are the deal stages? Because there's two things. We talked about how you should label them, right? I think we had a good conversation there. Now, I think there are 3 or 5 deal stages that are sort of basic. It's sort of like, you breathe, you sleep, you drink, you breathe, you sleep, you walk, you go to the bathroom,
Okay.
you do different things. Those are like the, basic human things that you need to do, or if we talk about the senses, the 5 senses, and but everything boils down, I think, from these elements. There's the preparation, right? I think, call it what you will, you have to prepare. There's that introduction, right, which I think everyone has to do. There's the discovery, which I think everyone has to do. There's confirmation, which I think everyone has to do. Then there's pitching to a certain extent.
Presenting
that everyone has to do, and then you've got to close. And I think every sales process in the world has those elements in there.
Yeah.
Now, like I did in mine, like in the discovery, or between the introduction and the discovery, I've got like the first message or first conversation. So some people might do that. And then in the discovery, maybe a very complex sale, they might want to have a few stages there because there's a lot of really complicated things going on. They have to wait for an RFP and then do this and do that. So I think there's a variety. Like you could probably have up to 7 stages and as little as 4.
Yeah.
Basically, I think they really encompass. Like someone might say, well, you mean it's so fast that there is no preparation. Okay, so then maybe stage 1 include preparation, introduction.
Yeah, obviously it all depends.
Discovery, because if you're selling popsicle sticks.
Yeah, or if you have like a strong inbound machine, then you're getting a lot of inbound deals. Your preparation is part of your discovery. Like it's
Exactly.
Versus prospecting, where you're probably spending a lot more time preparing. Like I can imagine an inbound lead, you're just kind of going on the website, checking out the LinkedIn profile. Either you have a lot of information in the demo requests that come in, the contact requests that came in, or you have to have this conversation, right? They're expecting you. So yeah, I think that that's where different. You need to tailor your process. I worked with a client who had like 3 stages, right? Because they had a big inbound machine. It was an easy sell. It was easy, like
because if his inbound message is giving him the lead, the name, all the information, and almost 3/4 of the discovery is there.
Yeah, and then it's just like
maybe he just has to do a demo and close.
Yeah, it was just like discovery, establishing the needs, like this is it. I mean, at that point, it was just like, do you want it or not? Like there was nothing else to go through. Usually he spoke right away to the decision maker. It was more of a B2C style sale. So there's no like complex purchasing process.
My brother's business is like that. He's like one of the number 1 guys in our area that sells a specific product, and people know his website really well. So he does good marketing. They come in, they pre-establish everything. So by the time they call them, often like, it's almost a done deal because they're looking for specific things. It's B2B, but like you said, it happens a lot like a B2C.
I mean, and that's a conversation for another day, because I don't know how long we've been talking to the timer on this. But
one last thing. So, who uses them?
I mean, I think the easy answer there is sales, marketing, and customer service to a certain extent, right? I'm working with a customer service organization for who, like, they need to know what's going on in the deal stages because they need to help prepare like their back end. I think it's just people use them differently. And obviously marketing can help, like you said before, like sending off communications or targeting people with ads based on where they are in the sales process. And, sales, I mean, sales people, we've been talking about for a little bit now as to who's using them. And then there's your revenue leadership, right? Your anybody who's intent on building pipeline forecasting and stuff like that, who is going to, and that's why ultimately I think CRMs, less and less now, but had this negative perception where they were for the man, right? Like the people looking at, they just wanted you to fill out all the properties because they needed to figure out easily what the revenue was coming in. But most people sales were like, I don't care if it's one, I get my commission. That's all, you know what I mean? And so I think that's less and less the reality now with CRMs like HubSpot, which are more integrated platforms.
Old school reps would say, "Oh yeah, they just want to check up on us."
Yeah, and I still encounter that, and I'm like, okay, you know, I mean, don't you have a Facebook profile? Anyway, I'm not gonna get into that, but that's my quick answer onto who uses it. I think it's every. Well, the easy answer is sales, but
I've got nothing to add to that because I agree with you. You know, you've got the executives. You've got the the sales people, like you said, the marketing people, the customer service people, and then you've got the actual sales force, not the CRM, but the actual force
people.
People who are using it. And I think personally, if I had a big company, I'd say I'd give access not to play in it, but I'd give access to everyone in even the accountants could go look at, oh, this is how it works, because it gives them it should give you a good lifeline as to how the whole customer relationship happens, right?
Yeah.
So I personally think everyone in the company should use it. I'm from even the receptionist should go in and say, oh, look, this is what's happening. It's interesting. And
yeah, and I mean, you talked about accounting. Listen, there's a lot of stuff in there too, but I think, I was just talking to somebody before our recording now, and they're like, oh yeah, that all happened. Like all our profit stuff happens on the accounting software. And I was like, but shouldn't your CRM and your accounting software like speak to each other? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and that's just still this disjointed reality where, oh yeah, accounting does this and sales does that. And that's the silos that we need to break down if you want to get real value at the end of the day. Like, and I've worked at those companies where, nobody believes the numbers that are in the CRM. What they believe in is just what's in the accounting system. And I'm like, wow, that's so broken, because you don't, it's important to know what's happened, as in, i.e. the revenue you got. But if you can't tell what's going to happen, I mean, that's dangerous.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, I'm an old fart, and I was a sales manager many years ago, and we didn't have a CRM, and I used to manage that way. I would look at last year's numbers to see where this year's numbers should be. I mean, we were selling very much a commodity at the time. The people they thought they were selling not a commodity, but it really was a commodity. Anyways, all that to say that back then, had I had a CRM, it would have been so useful to be able to help the team move forward. I mean, CRMs did exist. We were late. This is like in the...
No, but that's exactly what that is, right? Like, instead of having to like export to Excel and crunch all the numbers yourself, like that's how your CRM can look like, right? What did we do last year? And where we had in comparison this year, and maybe a 1 year, but obviously this was a more mature business. So if you're looking maybe an average of the past 5 years or 6 years, or rolling average of those years, and you're looking at this year, like, oh, right? And that's why, like, when somebody tells me like, oh, all their numbers are in the accounting system, I'm like, oh, like, so you're gonna show up one day at the end of the fiscal year and be like, wow, this was a really shitty year. Like, this makes no sense.
Yeah. And I agree with you. It's old school, but that's changing. I think that's
changing a lot. Yeah,
but it's taking a while. Like we said before, humans don't like change, so things are progressing in a manner that works. Hey, awesome. Have we covered everything we need to cover here?
I think we did. Thank you, Paul. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Next week, we're talking about decision makers. So attach you. Yeah.
We're talking about decision makers next week, everyone.
All right. Take care, Paul.